Do I have the mic?
You do?
Can everybody hear me? All right. So I came here today because I wanted to be able to hear if there was something that would trigger an emergency meeting. What would it be? Is it that there's an astronomical amount of cases that jumped up? Is it that there's a case that now is in effect that may not get overturned? Is it that there's a lot of things that may have occurred that? Because I will tell you, regardless of how you feel about my board members that I serve with, I respect every one of them for the points that they bring to the table. Because that is true governance in Brevard. So whether we disagree with the way it happens, you respect everybody. So I was excited. And I'm standing here with you today looking at all of the stuff that I had, only 42 hours to look over from the subject and 1 hour to look over from the actual policy that was printed here. And I started to dig in. First off, I found out that hospitalizations, quarantines, COVID positives from both staff and students is going down. This is not my opinion. This comes from the CDC and our own data. Oh, did I say that this is illegal? This is an illegal motion for policy right now. Please, we don't want to stop the meeting because Ms. Belford will get fired up. She has the respect for that too. So let me get started. I'd like to put into the minutes, because there has been questions in the past about some of my stuff that was Googled instead of looked up, and I wanted to be able to provide my school board members what I was going to talk about. I apologize about not giving it to you ahead of time, but we did have an emergency and we didn't have time, and I literally had these off the press not even 5 minutes before we came into the meeting. So I am going to, everything that we talk about here, I am going to put into the minutes as we move. And I'll give Ms. Escobar a copy at the end of the meeting of everything that is. So let's get started. Board members, if you'll take a look at the Ms. Aguirre's daily quarantine list, and if you'll look at the final page, which says August 30th, 2021. If you will notice, our overall quarantines associated to confirmed cases went down 27% since Friday. Our overall quarantines to home cases went down 29%. Our overall student quarantines in general went down 27% more. Our overall employee quarantines also went down 18%, and our student cases went down 28%. Now, some people may say it's a Monday, and that is an anomaly that occurred on the data sets which I presented. But the key is it was not as significant as it is today. And you can't just take that piece of data. You have to look at all the other data. When you find the consistency of numbers going down, then you bring this data into play. Next, take a look at Parish Medical COVID-19 hospitalizations off of their Facebook page. You will notice that from August 24th to August 29th, Parish Medical's hospitalizations went down 25%. Now, this is significant because if you guys have been watching the Facebook pages, you will find that there has been an up and down for a while, but now you will see that they are starting to come down more consistently. And that's why I provided 5 days worth of COVID-19 hospitalization rates from Parish Medical. And to be truthful, the ICU and intubated rates remain the same, but that's because those last longer. When you look at data sets, first cases, then hospitalizations, then ICUs and deaths, okay? I also am submitting into evidence, or to the minutes, Health First's Facebook page showing 5 days worth of numbers coming down in hospitalizations. This shows a 7, and just now, another day just got posted not less than 30 minutes ago, showing an increase from 9% over 5 days. Numbers are coming down. I also would ask, and I don't expect you guys to know all this real quick, so if you needed a second to stop and look through it because of efficacy. I would also like to ask you to look at the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention COVID Data Tracker, which seems to be on pace and right now. So some of you are looking at the DOH numbers and they're delayed. They're delayed by a week, and that's because a lot of the numbers come in and they show the trends. The CDC pulls from multiple data sets. They're literally up to date. In looking at that, cases per 1,000, down 1.7%. They do not record deaths, so I will not speak to that, but I don't have any data sets on that. Positivity, testing positivity. Now, mind you, we are mostly only testing individuals that have symptoms. So this is not a data set that is being controlled because of more testing. This is being a data set controlled that we are actually going down. Down 3.44%. Testing volume down 19.83%. New admissions into hospitalizations down 6.63%. Number of beds used inside of our hospitals down 2.36%. Number of ICU beds stayed the same. Positivity case down 3.44%. I stated that. Now, if you'll move on, the other number that is very key to know is that our county is number 40 out of 67 in case rate per 1,000 in the last 7 days. 40. We are not looking at a massive amount in front of us. We look at a massive amount behind us. I just will tell you, I listened to the judge for 2.5 hours. He gives great lessons on history and everything else. And I looked for all of the data sets that he had, and he presented some good data sets. But I have been looking the whole time where I could find hard data. And this is what I would like to present and put into the minutes. Next thing, I would like to point out the effectiveness of what we are about to do. Currently, the majority of our staff in secondary does not wear a mask. Currently, the majority of our students in secondary do not wear masks. It is a larger number in some and a smaller majority in others. But I will tell you, for the most part, and that is an anecdotal evidence that has not been provable, that I can't put in the minutes, but if you sit there and ask those principals and admin and teachers, they will back that data up. Currently, if we don't have teachers that are effectively wearing them and students that are effectively wearing them, how do we expect them to effectively push it and monitor it and enforce it? It's a difficult situation. Also, we will not be the ones that are in the classroom that are trying to enforce the policy. I substituted last year. This was absolutely difficult to watch as kids wore their masks around below their nose, which is stated in the policy that they have to do. Kids that have it half hanging off, kids that have all that, as they pile to the doors. And the effectiveness of it is called in question. And I have said this from the beginning. This is not something new that I have been stating. How do you expect a bus driver to be safely driving a bus and look up in the rearview mirror constantly to say, pull your mask up? Stop, Johnny, put your mask on. Have you put your mask on before you get in? How do you expect administrators who are now, because of an MOU with the union, forced to do all of these medical opt-outs and everything else that we're about to talk about? Because the MOU from the union that I know of last says that they are not to do that at all. How do you effectively ask to enforce a mask mandate if the teachers in the classroom are asked not to enforce it? You have less than 6 principals / administrators that are literally asking more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teachers to help them on quarantines right now. And you're going to expect them to monitor these certificates on top of other things. It's difficult. This has been consistent from what I've said from the beginning. So let's get into the policy. Here's where I have some issues. First piece, Judge Cooper, Florida Circuit Court for the Second Circuit of Florida, found that the Centers for Disease Control is the preeminent authority in the United States for infectious disease control. He quoted the CDC to be used inside of statute. He found that they have been used. They are not the predominantly authoritative. They just lost a Supreme Court case that they were trying to use they removed their emergency powers in dealing with temporary landlord moratorium. They are not an authority that can give and demand. They can only recommend. So when we look at that for a piece, look at how the CDC's recommendations have changed. If we are looking for the CDC, the only thing that has been consistent about the CDC's recommendations on mitigation strategies is that they are not consistent. That is the consistency, that they change them. And I am not in any way trying to trash the CDC. I am purposely saying that they are not a governing board and that they are not consistent with their quarantine. Goes on. Legislature intends during an extended, it says, moreover, section 252.36, section (1) of the Florida statute states the legislature intends during an extended public health emergency such that the COVID-19 pandemic, there should be a presumption that the K-12 public schools, to the greatest extent possible, should remain open so long as the health and safety of students and school personnel can be maintained by specific public health mitigation strategies recommended by federal or state agencies for education settings. Well, that sounds pretty good. The problem is that the title of section 253.36 is the governor's emergency powers. So if the governor's emergency powers are being quoted, then we should follow the Florida DOH rules rather than the CDC rules, which have already been struck down in the Supreme Court. I call into question the argument that gives us even the ability to give this policy. Next section, the CDC qualifies as a federal health agency as specified in Florida statute. Moreover, CDC guidelines explicitly recommend all individuals, students as well as staff, wear face coverings while inside, whether they have been vaccinated or not, until the spread of COVID-19 is better in control. That's great. They are making a recommendation. There is no rule-making authority. We follow the Florida DOH if there's a Florida governor's mandate for emergency ruling. It goes on to start talking about not only that was the justification for calling the meeting. Now it goes on to say to mask mandate, but then we mask mandate if we have these other things that are allowed to not have to be mask mandated. My argument for bringing this up is that we are creating a mask mandate that is basically ineffective because you are creating a group and subsets that are going to not wear their mask, which effectively is going to not make a mask mandate effective. Medical certification. A face covering shall not be required for persons who present school district staff with a certification from a licensed healthcare provider that the person has medical, physical, or psychological contradiction that prevents the person from being able to safely wear a mask covering. Okay, we've got a lot of contradictions, which will create a lot of risk because our administrators are not medical professionals. They cannot look at a form, and we are not providing one to say that this is what is a contradiction. We do not want our administrators to be sitting there and making the choice of whether they should or not make a mask when we don't even stipulate what that looks like, and we haven't even trained them to do it. IEPs, 504s. A face covering shall not be required for persons who have documented through an IEP or 504 plan that the person has medical, physical, or psychological contradiction that prevents the person from being able to safely wear. Okay. 504s, you guys, IEPs, they include gifted children. They include students with disabilities. They make up almost 30% of our population, and in some schools make up more in secondary. It is a difficult thing when you are going to say that you are going to give a medical opt-out, then you're going to give a 504 and an IEP opt-out. Here's one. Strenuous physical activity. A face covering shall not be required for any person inside or outside of any school district facility while such person is engaged in strenuous physical activity. That's gymnasiums. That's your workout centers. That's a kid walking up a stairwell, if they want to make the argument. What is the effectiveness of a policy if those are the stipulations? And it does not go on to say who's going to monitor that. So if a student is going up the stairs and they take it off, who's going to tell them put it back on? Well, it was a strenuous activity. It was strenuous for me to walk. I'm a former teacher in this district who will tell you that kids will use every single opportunity to try to get out of what they don't want. And I'm not telling you this because anything else, because it's putting our teachers and our staff in a situation where it's difficult to hold. They can't sit there and effectively look at these stipulations and make it to where it is effectively going to keep a mask mandate. Now, whether you believe in mask mandates or not, this is not a mask mandate. And it is not effective. Cloth face coverings. Commercially produced or home face cloth face coverings are acceptable for compliance with this policy, provided that the face covering consists of multiple layers of cloth, resulting in the blocking of light when it's held up to light, covers both the mouth, the nose, and fits snugly against the sides of the person's face with no gaps. Okay, again, effectiveness of that. First thing, when you look at it, what teacher is going to hold up a mask to look at it to see about the light going through? What teacher is going to tell the kids? I mean, how many times have we been out in the community where there's a mask mandate and everybody wears it here? I'm not saying that I'm telling you it's effectively difficult to enforce. And I'm telling you also, as I stated before, that students and teachers that are not wearing them now are not going to effectively enforce. It is a difficult situation. Section 5, this emergency policy becomes effective immediately upon approval and will remain in effect for 90 days. A 5-day grace period may be extended, to those who needed to obtain exemption documentation. The school board will review the emergency policy every 30 days and authorizes the superintendent to end the face covering requirement if levels of the community transmission drop to a moderate transmission as defined by the CDC to be no less than 50 new cases per 100,000 people. That's less than 1% of our population. That is an unattainable number that will never be obtained inside the 90 days. So when we look at past practices of under that, with the current pandemic the way it is, this is 90-day policy that can be reviewed only if it has a 1% effectiveness. Now, did I mention that right now, this is illegal? All right. I truly was hoping that there would be some sort of evidence that I missed when I came here today, and I apologize because Chairperson Belford has not spoken yet, and that is not fair for me to say. But so far, I have not found anything more than what we already knew prior to Friday. And might I say that if we are, I'll get to that in a minute. We had less than 42 hours to review a policy that was subject and less than a couple of hours to get a perfect one. That is not how we govern. We in this county have taken every slow roll attempt in every single policy we have ever written. Every single time that we have come up on a policy, we are in the 9th hour, and parents are screaming across the district, guys, wait a minute. You should have made these decisions 60 days ago. And I have bought into that policy governance because we want to make it right. But to give a policy of 42 hours ahead of time for an emergency meeting on a Monday, when there is only a governor's or a court case that might have been the trigger, that's not good governance. It goes against every single fabric we've ever had. I want to get into the policy. Mr. Gibbs. When does the Judge Cooper's judgment become law?
When he signs the order.
And has he signed the order?
Not that I'm aware of.
And has he given indication of when that order may come?
As early as Tuesday. His order was he hoped to sign by Tuesday.
So, Mr. Gibbs, being the fact that the judge has not signed it, and that is the trigger to make that law, is this policy going against the rule of law?
Going against the DOH order.
Which was the rule of law up until Judge Cooper made it.
Until he signs the order.
Sure. Now, Mr. Gibbs, if in the event that the judge gives a stay and we still have this policy in effect, we would still be not in compliance of the law.
Yes.
And if we have this policy and it goes into effect, the judge issues the stay, and then we have the policy in effect, ultimately, can the parents file suit against us for not having followed the law?
I don't know that the parents can sue on the DOH. That would be the DOE trying to enforce their order, or the DOH potentially bringing action to enforce their order. The parents could sue under another potential claim, but that's what you're seeing right now with the DOE cases being opened against the district.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Just so that everybody knows, I let Mr. Gibbs know that I was going to have those questions for him yesterday so that I would not have any kind of back and forth out of respect for him. Okay. Now, all this comes into effect because of one thing. And I'll tell you from my personal experience why it fires me up. Because in 2000, I worked as the legislative coordinator for Greenberg Traurig Law Firm. And Greenberg Traurig Law Firm was the lead counsel for George W. Bush against Al Gore. So I sat through so many court cases with the greatest minds in the country. James Baker. We had the best attorneys, Barry Richards. I could go down the list. And I watched as it moved through local, state, Court of Appeals, state, Supreme Court, federal court. This is the first stop for this law. And when you look at the path that it's going to go on, it is irresponsible to try to put a policy in place while we create a seesaw back and forth of going back and forth through it. Because ultimately, even in the case in 2000, there was one moment when the entire firm thought that they had won. And everybody gathered around. And we were all getting ready to hear the verdict. And one guy, James Baker, said, don't you start getting together, everybody get out. And we heard at that moment that it was going to the Supreme Court, and they started counting in West Palm Beach. This is a seesaw. I have a personal, with large experience here, with large cases, that it is a seesaw. And we don't need to put the mental health of our people into a seesaw back and forth over whether this is law, whether that's not, putting our teachers in harm's way. And that is why this is a difficult situation for me. Now, I'm open. I'm here to listen to any argument that we have, but I am open. But for these reasons, as it stands now, I cannot support it.